Welcome to today's community call AMA with Origin Protocol. We are joined by a handful of the Origin lads. We have Micah, we have Rugalini, and we have Ryan, all here to walk us through what is going on with Origin. We have a bunch of questions that we've sort of generated over the past few days, but thank you all for joining us. Micah, I think you're going to be like the main guy here for this call. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do over at Origin?
Sure, sounds good. It's great to be here. You got a great community, and we're excited to be a part of it. I am Micah. I am VP of Product at Origin. Been here for a long time. One person on the team said that Mike has been here since dinosaur times. I joined in early 2018 as an engineer, have evolved into leading product. And Origin, of course, itself started in 2017. Raised a considerable amount of money, although interestingly not from an ICO. It was just traditional fundraising back then. But they've been really good stewards of that money, built an incredible team, really focused on engineering side. And it became clear along the way that I was not going to be one of those superstar engineers, and evolved into this current role that I'm in. And it's been a great ride, and I'm even more excited today about the future of Origin than what we've done in the past.
So thanks for the introduction. Origin is a pretty old is not the right word for it, but it's a protocol that's been around in DeFi for quite a while. You guys were here last cycle, and you are remaining this cycle, but building a lot of new stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about the initial idea of Origin and how it sort of evolved into what it is today?
Yeah, the original vision for Origin was building decentralized marketplaces, taking the sharing economy, really any kind of two-sided marketplace where you want to disintermediate a market, remove rent-seeking actors. You could imagine Airbnb, Uber, that kind of thing, bring it on chain. We invested a lot of effort into building out that kind of marketplace, and it was just way too early. This was, back in 2018, 2019. And so we had some really cool tech, but the blockchain was just nowhere near ready for that. I'm still not sure that it is. And of course, along the way, DeFi Summer happened. And, we realized that this whole theme of peer-to-peer transactions, removing intermediaries, really makes a lot of sense for money. And all the different use cases for money, all the different traditional finance markets coming on chain. And so we took that opportunity to build what at the time was the first yield generating stablecoin. This was Origin Dollar, OUSD. I think at its peak, it reached 300 million TVL. And it was novel because it was an ERC20 token that you would just hold in your wallet, and it would grow every day without you having to stake, without you having to claim any rewards, etc. And that same code base has evolved over the years to become Origin Ether, which is our LST that has the tightest peg to ETH of any of the top LSTs, not to mention also a higher yield than most of the other LSTs. And again, that same code base evolved into SuperOETH, which is what I'm excited to talk about today, and I think your community is becoming aware of.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the tightness of peg and the mechanisms for both OUSD and OETH. So my assumption, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the reason why OETH has such a tight peg is because it feeds its existence feeds its own liquidity. It has a really interesting backing model that I think is unique only to it, as far as I know, in the DeFi space. And when I first heard about this model, I was super critical, and I'm slowly getting used to it. And now I'm at the point where I think I understand it enough to see why it isn't actually an issue. But the reason why people might think it's an issue is because it backs itself. Can you explain how OETH actually works and why it isn't like turtles all the way down?
Sure. Yeah, this is really important. The thing that matters most, I believe, to users is that anytime they want to come along and redeem their LST or their stablecoin or whatever it is, OETH in this case, anytime someone wants to redeem for the underlying ETH, they need to be able to get it without any gatekeepers. It needs to be permissionless. and there needs to always be an equivalent amount of backing collateral. That's the core promise that we never compromise on. And so you're right that there is some OETH backing OETH, but none of that OETH that's backing OETH is in circulation. It's all held by the protocol. And so if anyone wants to take some of that OETH out of the protocol, they have to give us more ETH. At
Which is
that
which is
moment,
effectively minting, right?
yeah, exactly. It's a great way to say it. So by the time any OETH enters circulation, it becomes fully backed by ETH.
And the opposite is true. If they want to redeem their OETH, they're effectively burning it. What they're doing is giving it back to the protocol. So it's not really a burn, but they're locking it back up. And then the converse is true. The backing ETH that had backed that, plus whatever yield had been generated on the back end, is then given out. So that's the redemption mechanism, right?
Yeah, and actually, it's worth expanding on the redemption side in particular. There are multiple ways that users can get OETH or give it back to the protocol. What we're talking about here, the AMO or Algorithmic Market Operations controller, works on a DEX. In the OETH's case, it works on Curve. So in that case, you're buying or selling OETH into that pool just like any other token. And when you do it, it effectively, like you're saying, acts like a mint or a burn because you're giving it back to the protocol or taking it away from the protocol and giving us ETH in exchange. However, you can also interact directly with the vault. You can, there's a traditional mint function or a traditional redeem function. You can do that. That happens to be a little more gas intensive, and sometimes it may or may not be a better price, and so we route you to the DEX. But there's one other piece that I wanted to point out, which is we recently launched a completely new type of pool it's actually outside of Origin ETH itself. It's an independent protocol that we call an automated redemption manager.
This is
ARM.
the ARM, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And in this case, what users can do is they can instantly swap ETH for OETH or vice versa. Lossless, no fee, no slippage, no price impact. And this is an innovation that we brought to Lido staked ETH probably 8 months ago and have since generated over $500 million in volume just on a single pool. In the Lido staked ETH case, there is a fee. The peg isn't perfect. In the OETH case, it's one-to-one instant. You can always swap at low scale volume right now because that pool is pretty new. But the promise is that even if that instant liquidity is not large enough for your trade, you can always get the asynchronous withdrawal one-to-one with no fee, just like many other LSTs.
Okay, now with that redemption, why is there a time component? So do you have a queue that you can see somewhere, as either like a smart contract or like maybe it's off-chain analytics, and you see that queue and you know that if you don't have a withdrawal reserve, then you have to go withdraw from, I think you guys use convex pools to back. Is that why there's a time component, or is there another aspect to this component?
Yeah, good question. I might have conflated several different options there for the user. The time component is associated with the beacon chain validators. Like many other LSTs, if you want to actually pull ETH out of a validator, you want to pull it out of Ethereum staking, that requires a time component. And so that's like the fallback with OETH. If you need to pull out $30 million of ETH out of the protocol, that's going to have to come from at least today. That's going to have to come from the validators, and exiting validators takes I think currently 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
So that's a very similar experience to what you would get with Lido or others. But for most users, they don't have to wait for that. They use this instant one-to-one pool,
ARM, yeah.
the OETH ARM, and then the Curve pool that the AMO runs on, that's just a traditional DEX pool that is tightly integrated into OETH, where it also has deep liquidity. But we actually expect most users to move to the ARM at this point, and they don't have to think about it. They can just come to the DApp at originprotocol.eth.limo, and they just say, here's how much OETH I have, and I want to get out to WETH, and it will find the most advantageous route for you, which is usually the ARM.
Okay, so 2 points you made here. One is it looks like you guys automatically route through the best option. So if I do 100 OETH, which is roughly a quarter million, still ARM has enough liquidity to provide for this, which is astounding. But at 1,000, 2.3 million, then it routes through the redemption, which is pretty decent. So I like that you guys show what can be handled. That's really useful. And then the next point is, why do people say WETH instead of WETH when it's not ETH, it's ETH?
That's another good one. I think I have heard quite a few people say.
So have I.
And there was actually a brief moment where I tried to make the case internally before we launched Origin Ether, which is OETH. I tried to make the case that if you were to really pronounce that word, it would be OETH instead of OETH. But I lost that battle.
Was it because ETH is WETH instead of WETH?
Yeah, it was just a cute observation that I had at the time. But most people say ETH, and so OETH makes sense.
I'm gonna call it OETH. I'm gonna assume that the OE makes a sharp O sound. Okay, so that's fantastic. Thank you for walking us through that. Now we do have some additional. So I noticed that OETH is it used to be backed by like a basket of LSTs. Now it seems like you guys have your own native staking for the ETH, which is fantastic. Congratulations on that. And it's roughly 66-ish, so 2/3 of the backing ETH is natively staked, and then roughly 1/3, I think, actually less than a third. ETH, OETH, no, that's 9, so 9, yeah. So a little bit less than a third is in the LP. Is that intentional? Are those the intentional ratios?
I wouldn't say they're fixed or
targeted.
It's not necessarily going to be those same ratios over time, but I guess as OETH continues to grow, more and more of it will be natively staked.
Okay. Awesome. Perfect. Now let's kind of move over to SuperOETHb, and feel free to jump in if there's anything else on OETH or OUSD you want to get into, but clearly like the interest and protocol of the day, or like thing of the day, is SuperOETH, because the APY is so high and because we have composability sort of slowly making a break into the DeFi space. So the first thing that we'll notice, can I go to the SuperOETH swap, is that you have a headline APY of 18.84%, which is up like 3% since yesterday. So we need to understand how this APY works. Now, I have done some digging into this and found a few interesting things. So SuperOETH has an analytics page now, which is fantastic. They have this current APY, which I believe is this a moving average? Is this a 30-day moving average, or is this
I think if you switch it to the 7-day, that's the number you were seeing.
Then you get the 18.52. And if you go to proof of yield, this is where you get, it's already right here. This is where you get the daily yield. And then you can assume that, the 7-day would be the average of the past 7 days. And then yield distributed being like how much ETH was distributed. And what I found really interesting, and what a lot of the people in the dojo I think this will sort of answer the question that Matt had, is when you click on this, you'll see these numbers down here, which is SuperOETHb receiving yield and then SuperOETHb giving up yield. And my mind immediately went to MakerDAO, where they have all of the DAI. Everything that backs DAI is effectively getting yield on treasuries and off-chain yield-bearing like paper, and only the people who stake their DAI are actually benefiting from that yield. So because a smaller portion of the DAI is earning the yield from a huge pile of DAI, they're getting a disproportionately high or leveraged yield. Now that's how I assumed this worked. Am I correct in that assumption, or am I totally off?
You're on the right track.
Okay, I'll take it.
I think the important thing to note is that it's a similar dynamic, but the important thing to note is that if you want to earn yield from SuperOETH, all you have to do is hold the token in a regular wallet. You don't have to take any action. You don't have to stake it. You don't have to lock it up. You don't have to really do anything. You just hold an ERC. And that's the functionality that we inherited from Origin Dollar, the yield-bearing stablecoin from DeFi Summer. But to answer your question, if that SuperOETH is held in a smart contract, like a DEX pool, a multi-sig, some kind of smart wallet, that's where it doesn't earn yield natively for the holder. Now, the holder can opt in to receive yield, but we kind of stumbled onto this back in the day with Origin Dollar, because we had a lot of OUSD in a Uniswap pool, and Uniswap pools were incapable of accounting for that yield because the token supply grows automatically every day and the yield was getting lost. And so we realized we should just disable the yield for DEX pools or all smart contracts. If somebody knows, if a smart contract knows how to handle the yield, it can opt in and receive it. But otherwise, that yield just won't go to waste because that's what was happening before. And instead, that yield goes to all the other holders. And it works out nicely and provides this boost mechanism.
So is that why there is a wrapped SuperOETHb? Because that's the yield bearing, or the what they call value accrual yield bearing version of this token?
Yep, because OETH or SuperOETHb is rebasing
Right.
up only,
Mm-hmm.
which is important to point out. It won't fall in token supply. It only goes up because it's constantly earning yield. And then the wrapped version is actually a 4626 vault that instead of the number of tokens going up in your wallet, the value of the tokens goes up every day.
Yep. Okay. And we're all familiar with that mechanism. Now, we do have a question from Brian that says, how did you or how do you disable yield for smart contracts? Is it like a simple contract address blacklist function, or is it more complex than that?
It is a little bit complex in the sense that it automatically detects whether or not an address is a smart contract, but there isn't a blacklist. There's in fact a whitelist where if a smart contract wants to receive the yield, it opts in, adds itself to the whitelist, and we also have the ability through decentralized governance. We have the ability to opt a contract in on its behalf because a lot of contracts, they've already been deployed, they're not upgradable, or it's just, really labor intensive for them to upgrade and opt in. So we can governance can do it on behalf of the contract, and that governance, of course, is controlled by OGN stakers, the governance token for all of these yield products.
Okay. Okay. So now I'm sort of like building a better mental picture of this all. So when I go back over here and I see this, 29,000 versus 5,000, that 29,000 might not necessarily just be all of the protocol owned liquidity. It could just be any SuperOETH that is being deployed in DeFi. And because they're interacting with smart contracts or being used in smart contracts, they're not rebasing. And because it's not wrapped, it's also not value accrual. So anyone who's using their tokens that aren't wrapped in DeFi is not going to be benefiting from that, but the backing of the SuperOETHb will be yield generating, and that's going to be going to the people who are just holding it or who have a wrapped version of it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why it's one of the reasons why we recommend that people not LP into the Aerodrome pool because they're giving up that yield, and the LP yield is more volatile than holding SuperOETH itself.
Okay. Now let's actually talk about that. That was the next thing I wanted to mention is because when I go to Aerodrome, I see this really nice 20% APR, and I assume it's because of the way Aerodrome works, that is single tick liquidity. Now, there's nothing wrong with single tick liquidity. In fact, I like single tick liquidity for super tight pairs, but it's also risky because if it ever goes out of range, you risk like really, really volatile wicks. So tell me a little bit about who or what entity sort of monitors or does the data analytics for this liquidity, and how, if ever, this is rebalanced or what goes on with this here.
Yeah, so this liquidity by and large is owned by the protocol. So when you put ETH into SuperOETH, some of it goes into the beacon chain through a bridge with Chainlink CCIP, and some of it goes into this pool. This is the AMO that we were talking about earlier, that, in OETH's case, it works through Curve. In SuperOETH's case, it works through Aerodrome. So a lot of the ETH that users are depositing into SuperOETH goes into that pool and provides exit liquidity, and at the same time captures Aero emissions from Aerodrome, turns that into yield, and automatically compounds it. So our team is constantly monitoring this. We have a lot of automation and years of experience tracking these things through the prior versions of this code base. We also hold a lot of SuperOETH ourselves because we think it's a great product and we believe in it and want to dog food it. And so there should be enough liquidity here in that single tick for all regular users to exit. Now, it's unlikely that every user is going to want to exit at the exact same time. And so that's something that we have to account for. But in most cases, that's not how it will play out. We will be adding a withdrawal mechanism to SuperOETH, just like we have for regular OETH as a backstop. But up until this point, we haven't seen much capital leave SuperOETH at all. And I think anyone who has a sizable position of SuperOETH can look at the Aerodrome pool and see that there's more than enough liquidity for them to exit at effectively a 1-to-1 price.
So I was simulating some swaps here, and it seemed like if I wanted to swap 5,000 SuperOETH, still no price impact, or technically 1 BIP price impact. So it's effectively all or nothing here. At millions of dollars, still nothing. It's almost as if you're redeeming it. And it's not until you get into like the 8 figures, which, as you mentioned, just isn't feasible because that's not how much has been minted or how much is circulating. So pretty fascinating mechanism here. I mean, technically, I guess if someone had just like near infinite funds, they might be able to have an impact. Is there any like failsafe against that? So I guess that the question is it possible for someone to have enough SuperOETH to depeg it? Like, is that even logically possible? Could they even have that much in the first place?
Today, I don't believe that it's possible. And by the time it becomes possible, we'll have the permissionless redemption mechanism that we have with OETH. And at that point, it just presents an arbitrage opportunity if somebody tries to move it out of that tick.
Right, exactly. So if it does go out of the tick, fantastic. Anyone who has like a limit order set up will eat. Okay, awesome. Now, let's get to composability. I think that's probably like the most interesting thing happening in DeFi for a lot of these wrap staked assets. And you guys sort of had your big composability push, I think yesterday, with the Morpho pool that launched. So we're on base chain. Let's go to borrow. I want to also talk about your relationship with RE7. So RE7 is really blowing up. I think, are they going to have their own token? I know Amphor is. I wouldn't be surprised if RE7 is also going to. Because, oh yeah. Okay. Anyways, RE7 is the lister of the vault here for Wrap SuperOETHb. By the way, this is the wrap version, so this is getting yield at a 3.07% interest rate. So first question is, what is your relationship with RE7?
Yeah, so back in the day when we had Origin Dollar rocking and rolling, and it had, I think, $300 million in TVL, RE7 was the primary user. They were just like a huge fan of Origin Dollar. They were very actively an LP in Curve and holding a lot of OUSD themselves. And so, that's a relationship that I guess we've had now for 3 or 4 years. And when they became a curator on Morpho, we saw an opportunity to work with them to enable this leverage use case for OETH, our LST. And so they launched Market and added it to their vault on Ethereum for OETH, and now have just launched this one for SuperOETH. Not to get ahead of you, but you mentioned the interest rate there. This market has an adaptive interest rate model that I believe will kind of reach an equilibrium automatically over time. You're seeing in that chart to the right that the interest rate's gradually climbing. So it's not always going to be this low, but I'm quite excited about the prospects of there always being quite a wide spread between the rate that you're earning on SuperOETH and the rate that you're paying to borrow ETH. And it just makes that leverage strategy that much more interesting than you see with other LSTs.
So let's actually dive into that a little bit deeper. Do you know, 2 questions. One, how fast this interest rate will increase? So I think a couple of days ago, the max was 2.5-ish, and then at the end of the day it was like 2.8, and now it's 3.2. So it 3.28. So it's increasing at a constant rate, and I don't know what that rate is. First question. Second question, who is currently responsible? Eventually this will be decentralized, but who is currently responsible for reloading the deposits here?
So I don't know the rate that the interest rate will change. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts to accelerate a little bit. And RE7 is who manages the deposits because it's coming from their Morpho vault. RE7 WETH, I think is the name of the vault. And so they are, I think if you look at the history on this thing, they are constantly adding more ETH in small increments, and it's basically being borrowed almost instantly because the demand is so high for this strategy.
Okay, that's what I figured. Okay, so wait. My brain kind of short circuited. You're saying that RE7 is both depositing and borrowing, or are you saying that RE7 is depositing and it's just being borrowed by decentralized users almost immediately?
Yeah, no, it's being borrowed by, I don't know who these users are, but no, RE7 is the supplier of the capital, and their motivation is to drive yield for their because they have ETH depositors in their vault, and then they allocate a lot of that ETH to this SuperOETH market. And we're talking to, a handful of other curators, protocols, different ways that we can unlock this strategy. With a broader range of ETH suppliers in different venues. I don't have anything to announce today, but several of those are right around the corner. And so while this strategy is amazing and we really appreciate RE7 being a believer and launching this very early in the life of SuperOETH, we want to, grow the pie for everybody and make it more accessible.
Perfect. Okay, so 2 questions, and then I'll circle back to the strategy. One was from longtime dojo member, can never say his name. I'm gonna call you BZ Yuck. Otherwise, I'll call you Byuk, and I feel like that's wrong. BZ, if you have a better way to pronounce your name, please let me know. But he was saying that you lose 1% when wrapping. Now, I know that like a wrapped asset will always be worth more, so you'll get less of it than like the base asset. That I don't think is surprising to anyone, but he's saying that if you reverse that, you actually do lose on the overall procedure. So like if I was to where do we find that wrapping mechanism?
It's integrated into that same form. Yeah. So
Okay,
if you have SuperOETH on one side, yeah, there you go.
Okay, so we go like let's say 100 to 99.174. We can just take this number, copy it, switch it, paste, and okay. Well, that's not a loss at all. So BZ, am I missing something that you're asking? So if I took 100, it looks like I'm only losing. Well, I did that already. So we start from SuperOETHb. We'll do we'll do this many, so we have a really really big number, and so you're supposed to get less because wrapped SuperOETHb is worth more, so you get fewer of it. And so when you go to redeem it or unwrap it with that same amount you just wrapped, the dollar value. Okay, so right, probably UI issue, but the question here is that the dollar amount, the dollar value here on the bottom is a different dollar value than the dollar value here.
Yeah, thanks for flagging this. It does look like a little bit of a UI issue because you can first of all, there's no fee when you wrap or unwrap. And secondly, the SuperOETH value of wrapped OETH is constantly increasing, which is another way of saying that the ETH value of wrapped SuperOETH is constantly increasing. So yeah, we'll take a look at this, but there's no fee and there should not be any loss when you wrap or unwrap.
Okay, so if there's not an infinite money glitch, if you just like bought the wrapped version and then unwrapped it because it has a higher value currently, darn,
it'd be nice.
It would be nice.
It'd be similar to that Morpho strategy.
Okay, so tell us more about. You said that you may have some additional LPs coming online. Yeah, exactly. BZ. That's my next question. That will be either depositing ETH, providing ETH. That's the first question. So when Morpho increase?
It's happening constantly. I mean, I was looking at the 24 hours before this call, and there was just this gradual flow of ETH in. So yeah, it's already happening on Morpho. We're talking to them all day, every day about increasing it. But you can. I think we also announced yesterday that we have a new integration with Ionic. Ionic.money, which is another money market protocol on Base. And theirs is a little bit different. It's not quite the same economics as Morpho. It's a little bit different user experience. But my understanding, if you'd have to click on Base underneath, like it's maybe a third of the way down the page to toggle away from mode. And then there's our market. And what's different about Ionic versus Morpho is basically isolated money markets, where we want more ETH available for SuperOETH collateral. then we need that ETH to be allocated specifically to SuperOETH. Now, they do have a public reallocator thing, but that's not helping us at the moment. Whereas on Ionic, there's a whole bunch of WETH there available.
Hold up.
for-
So wait.
Oh, yeah?
Are you telling me that you're getting paid to borrow WETH right now on Ionic?
It would appear so if you can, you're getting that in the
Okay.
form of Ion tokens.
But that's not even true. So they just show this in a really weird way. A negative borrow APR means that you're paying. Unlike on most other front ends where a negative borrow APR means that you're being paid. So this actually does mean you're effectively net paying 3.2% because the base APR is negative 14.73%, which means you're paying 14.73% because there's no way that's positive. And then you're getting 11.55% in Ion rewards. So the net is roughly 3.2. Do you know if those Ion rewards are immediately liquid and how, like if they're just like distributed per block or if it's like you get a chunk every epoch? Do you know how those work?
I don't know for sure. I just opened a position to test this out a little while ago, and I wasn't exactly clear on I opened the position, and 5 minutes later, I was not able to claim Ion rewards. So I haven't circled back to it this morning to see if I'm able to claim them the next day. But I think that's the assumption that you make when you open one of these positions is that your Ion is going to be worth enough to cover the interest that you're paying on the debt, because you're paying a much higher interest rate on Ionic than you would pay on Morpho, but you're getting a bunch of Ion tokens that you can theoretically liquidate to cover that debt.
Right, exactly. So looking at that 80% LTV, that's a max leverage of 5 for those guys who like math. Borrow cost, if the net really is 3.1, what was it, 3.1, 3.2? We'll say 3.3, we'll be crazy. That's still a max yield of 69%. And I mean, honestly, if you look at the current collateral yield, it was 18%. So, let's just say around ballpark. But if you put in that 14%, oops, wrong button, wrong place, 15%, even at that, you're still looking at 34% prior to incentives, which is crazy, right? That's prior to incentives, and then any Ion would just be icing on the cake. So that's pretty wild. The big question that we all need to then ask is what oracles are being used for wrapped SuperOEThb on Ionic. We know which ones are being used on Morpho. We looked at this yesterday, which was exchange rate oracles. We can dive in a little bit deeper. What about for Ionic?
Yeah, we've been recommending to every protocol that integrates OETH or SuperOETH, we've been recommending that they use the exchange rate oracle and that they treat OETH or SuperOETH as one-to-one with ETH. And that's actually something that Chainlink recommended when they deployed the OETH oracle earlier this year. So I haven't gone through personally to verify that that's what was implemented on Ionic, but so far I'm not aware of any protocols that have used some other kind of market rate oracle.
Okay. All right, cool. If you do get confirmation on that, let us know, because it's a really big risk. I mean, currently, because of the mechanism you guys have, the tightness of peg is going to be so intense because, as we looked at, you need effectively more than the circulating supply of wrapped SuperOEThb to depeg it. And so it's not feasible to depeg it, but black swans are black swans because they come out of nowhere. So you do still want to be, risk averse to market rate oracles. So if you do find out that you guys use exchange rate there, which you probably do, please do let us know, because that will totally change the risk profile of this market. Okay, and if you guys want to see the exchange rate oracle, we can quickly walk through that. That's on Morpho. Morpho has this really nice thing where they'll show you the oracle and the contract address at the top. Can you walk us through this oracle? So I was trying to understand it. I think it was DK Nugo, who is our resident, either DK Nugo or Nighthound, who always walk me through how to understand oracles here. So shout out to those guys, and neither of them are here. But let's see if it loads. The basic idea is one, it tells us it's an exchange rate oracle. My understanding of this oracle is that there are a bunch of different price feeds. Let's see if I can get this to load. I don't think I have a VPN on. I might have to take that off. Oh no, I was verified. Let's go. Was that the price feed is literally just looking at the redemption value of a wrapped SuperOEThb.
Yes. So wrapped SuperOEThb itself, the token, is a 4626 contract.
Right.
And a 4626 contract has this function called preview redeem, and it tells you how much of the underlying SuperOETH, in this case, you're going to get for a unit of wrapped SuperOETH. So that's the exchange rate between the wrapped token and the rebasing token. And then what RA7 did when they deployed this this oracle is once you know the amount of super OETH that the position is worth through that exchange rate, then they just treat super OETH as one-to-one with ETH.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, that's what I thought. So this is base vault conversion sample. So base vault. Ooh, okay. So what it does is it is an exchange rate from SuperOEThb to wrapped SuperOEThb, which SuperOEThb is this vault here. If you go to contract and if you go to Redis proxy, and then you go to preview redeem, you can put in however many shares, and what you'll get is effectively this number here, which tells you what is backing it. So 1.00832 ETH per wrapped SuperOEThb. That is the number that will come back as the value of this in ETH, because it is pricing SuperOEThb as 1-to-1, which is this number here, with ETH. Do I have it correct?
Yeah, I think so. I love that you're diving into Etherscan here. I really appreciate how thorough you are on this, because you're right. This is not something that people should gloss over. If they're using collateral that has a risk of depegging, and they're using it for leverage with a market rate oracle, it's almost inevitable that someone's going to get liquidated eventually.
Exactly right.
And in this case, there actually is no. Let me be careful and walk through this step by step. There is literally zero liquidity for wrapped SuperOEThb. There's none. There is no price. It doesn't exist, because if you want to liquidate wrapped SuperOEThb, you just unwrap it and then you sell the underlying SuperOETh for ETH. And so that's why this is implemented this way, because there's just no need for wrapped SuperOETh liquidity. There's no market for that. There's no need for anyone to come and buy or sell the wrapped version. And what it means for borrowers is that there's virtually no chance that you're going to get liquidated as long as that's how the oracle is implemented. And your only risk in that case becomes just your interest rate goes too high, and you're just not making any more money, so you just close the position. But it's not like it's going to get pulled out from under you.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So most of us here are familiar with interest rate spikes and how those can cause liquidation. We saw those a lot with like staked OUSDE, where the interest rates would go from like 7% to 45%. So if you were 11x leveraged, now you're paying 450% on your debt, which is insane. And so those can be scary. However, because you guys are already at max utilization and you can see sort of the increase of the interest rate, which, by the way, I do think it's nonlinear. I was doing like quick mental math here. So it might be logarithmic. It doesn't look exponential. But so I want to like quickly look at the supply here. As far as I understand, these are increases in lent ETH supply, presumably from RE7. Is that correct?
Yeah, last time I checked, it's all coming from RE7. And in other words, it's coming from their vault, which you could deposit into with the Earn tab up on the left. So, that underlying ETH is probably being sourced from decentralized real users. It's probably not coming all out of RE7's pocket, but it is their vault. They're the ones directing all of that ETH to this market.
Right. And then, and then when we see like very little, I guess, like peaks and troughs, that's probably also a result of the value of the ETH going up and down, because it's denominated in dollar terms. Well, it looked like there was a big, I don't know, $100,000 deposit recently. Some people in the dojo have pointed out that there are bots monitoring this, and it's probably one of us that is doing that. So we do have to beat the bots. That is the hard part. So if you guys ever have an upcoming announcement and we can try to get in there within the few seconds before it gets all taken, please let us know. But speaking of composability, right? You just mentioned Ionic, which is fantastic. Ionic is one of those markets that isn't siloed, so literally any ETH available on the platform is available to wrapped SuperOEThb collateralizers. Do you have a composability push plan to other money markets or other DeFi integrations? And if so, where are you looking to expand and what is the time horizon for that?
Yeah, we're talking to basically every money market on base, and then we'll soon be bringing SuperOETH to Optimism. So there will be similar opportunities for leverage there. But what we really want to do is look beyond just this leverage use case and just money market listings, because we envision SuperOETH being the superior LST, supercharged LST, as we call it, for any kind of protocol that wants to earn yield natively for their users and build on top of the beacon chain yield. We want them to be able to use SuperOEThb as a money Lego.
Can you explain what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a variety of different protocols. If you look at what happens on Ethereum, I mean, the list goes on of different ways that people use Lido
Yes.
and staked ETH as the yield generating component. What we really want to see is OETH itself back on Ethereum with having the tightest peg of any LST makes it the best yield source for generating yield for users or for protocols in a way that they don't have to absorb exit risk. So right now, if you're a protocol and you want to earn yield from Lido or some other LST, and then you need to take that money out of that protocol relatively quickly, you can't necessarily do that without taking some loss. And that's where OETH shines, because you can go in and out all day, every day, without having to pay any fees or any price impact. And so we want the same thing to be true for SuperOETH, and we expect it to be available across multiple different L2s, and it can become the main way that protocols build on top of the beacon chain.
Okay. And wasn't it true that some LRTs are also accepting OETHb? Or sorry, not OETHb, OETH?
Yeah, there are a couple, and actually Layer itself and Karak, and soon maybe another restaking protocol support OETH as one of the core restaking assets.
Very cool.
So
Very cool.
OETH can be used for restaking. Liquid restaking is a little bit of a different animal, but
Sure.
we have a partnership with a project called Yield Nest, which
Yep.
kind of came out of the Curve ecosystem, and they support OETH and are actually seeing some users come from Origin as a restaking avenue, because we're not offering restaking ourselves. We're focused just on this supercharged LST opportunity.
Okay, so let's talk about SuperOETH. It's like outsized yield. So there's like two more major points I want to hit here. One is you guys currently have obviously like the best base rate for like a staked version of ETH, which is 18, well, let's just say between 12 and 20%. That is mostly based on the fact that you guys have a lot of bribing power, as far as I understand, or voting power on the drones, Aerodrome and Velodrome. Can you tell us like where that power comes from and how you expect to sort of scale that with TVL?
Sure. We bootstrapped it using treasury funds. Like I mentioned earlier, Origin raised a lot and has been good stewards of that money over many years. So we were able to kickstart it. But along the way, we are accumulating protocol value in the form of Aero tokens. And so there will come a point, hopefully very soon, where the protocol is just constantly recycling those incentives and generating sustainable votes through Aerodrome and Velodrome. But at the same time, we're also accumulating a reserve of ETH. So it may be tough to believe, but even when SuperOETH is paying 18% yield, that is not it's not 100% of the yield that we are generating. We're saving some of it for a rainy day because we know that this isn't going to, we're not always going to be able to generate the same level of yield that we're generating today. And so we want to continue to deliver on the promise that it's going to be materially higher than vanilla LSTs. And the way to do that is to save some excess yield today, recycle a lot of incentives through Aerodrome and Velodrome, and then continue to generate protocol fees, performance fees for OGN stakers.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, I guess there's Man, I have so many questions. We're running out of time. One question is that was asked in the dojo was you guys had an exploit a few years ago, I think in 2022, and you also have Trail of Bits and Open Zeppelin audits, which are like the best audits in the business. As far as I know, the exploit was a reentrancy attack. Can you explain, like, were the big audits you have after that? Were they before that? How have you guys handled security after that?
Yep, great question. It was actually 2020 during DeFi summer when literally every day there were multiple exploits.
Yes.
I think the week that OUSD had its exploit, I think there were like three others, most of which were larger exploits like the same day. It was a wild time. It was an exciting time, but the industry as a whole and Origin in particular are much, much safer and have a lot of practices put into place, monitoring lots of mechanisms that will prevent this from ever happening again. At the time, we had all sorts of warnings on the DApp. This is beta. This is experimental.
Mm.
Don't, risk any money you don't want to lose. And the audit with Trail of Bits was underway. It was not yet
Okay.
completed at the time. And unfortunately, the exploit happened like a day before the audit was supposed to be complete. So we've since retained Open Zeppelin. Open Zeppelin is the best auditor in the business. They
Yep.
audit Coinbase and a bunch of other highly respected protocols. And so we've had them on retainer doing audits every quarter since then, basically. And so they've audited all of the OUSD and OETH code multiple times. Every single time there's a material change, they spend, several weeks on it. We also have some other practices in place. We have a relationship with Y Audit, which came out of the Yearn ecosystem, and they review every code change. They don't do a formal audit on specific pieces of the code, but every pull request on smart contract code they review. And then, of course, we also just have relentless internal practices. Every change has like two reviewers, not the person who wrote the code. We have lots of monitoring. It's just like day and night, a fundamentally different security practice than we had when we were all just figuring this out 4 years ago.
Love to hear it. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Sorry for getting the date wrong on there. I do remember that in the DeFi summer, like that was the golden age is the wrong word for it. It was the peak of reentrancy attacks, I think, because we weren't that familiar with them yet.
Yeah.
And then we just saw one after another, after another, after another, after another. Okay, so that's fantastic to hear. Yeah, Open Zeppelin and Trilobits, both top tier auditors, two of the best, if not the two best in the business. Last question, I know we're like right on time here, is what is, this might not be a short question, but I'll try to make it short. What is OGN and how does OGN relate to Super OETH?
Yeah, appreciate that. So OGN is the governance token for everything that Origin builds. All of these products generate protocol fees, and those fees go to OGN stakers. So it's sort of like a VE token model, like you're probably familiar with Curve and others. In our case, we call it XOGN. When you lock it up, you can choose how long you want to lock it to get a larger share of both rewards and voting power. But OGN is our entire focus. We create all of these yield generating products that people appreciate, but the end game is that it all creates value for OGN and stakers.
Okay, and from what I haven't seen a lot of incentivization utilizing OGN. Is there a plan to use those as incentives, or is the plan to always use that as like a representation of the revenue of the protocol?
We do use OGN a little bit as an incentive. So actually on Aerodrome, a little bit of the incentives that drive voters come from OGN. And part of that is because we want Aerodrome users to have some exposure and be aware of OGN. So we've been doing that a little bit. And then OGN is used in the Curve ecosystem to drive some of the liquidity and value for OETH. But what's important to us is that we don't flood the market with OGN. We want to use it intelligently and make sure that it gets some exposure. But we want to be careful about doing it responsibly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for answering all of our questions. And by the way, guys, if you want to learn more about Origin or the protocol, go join their Discord, follow their socials. If they have a Telegram, go ahead and, of course, jump in there. Also, they are the whole Origin team. We have a lot of Origin members who are in this Discord. So feel free to tag them and pester them in the chats. I will, if they're not answering, I'll poke them in the Telegram and hopefully get an answer from them. So thank you for the questions, guys. And that is it from me. Hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day.